Welcome back. We're here to talk about William Nylander. What is he worth? He's in a contract year. He's having a great year. Some would say a career year. But let's talk about it. There's a lot of reports saying he's estimated to get around 11.25 million. Let's kind of dive into it. So, full disclosure, it's kind of up in the air. But let's kind of dive into it and determine if 11.25 is realistic, unrealistic, what's going on here. Nylander stats this year: 37 games played, 21 goals, 33 assists, 54 points. I think he's tied for fifth in the league in points per game or something. On pace to have well over a 40 goal season, 45-ish goals projected. He's usually good for 30 to 40 goals in a season. So again, this is above his career average or even just recent average. He did score 40 goals last year and was 5 points over a point per game. So there's also that. Recency bias plays a part in contracts. On his own team, Austin Matthews, 36 games played, 30 goals, which is absurd. It's just absurd. 15 assists for 45 points. Austin Matthews just signed a $13.5 million annual average value contract for the length of 4 years. Marner, usually about 16 to 20 points over a point per game player throughout an entire season. He's within that 90 to 100 mark, 95 to 100 points. You can usually bet on him getting those kinds of points. Obviously, Marner and Matthews play together. Marner, very assist heavy. Matthews, very goal heavy. Both of these guys, though, are elite at what they do in terms of offense. Marner is one of the best passers in the game, and Matthews I don't even know how he does it. He'll take a casual wrist shot, and it'll just be pinpoint accuracy, and it'll go in, and there's nothing the defense or the goalie can do to stop it. Both of these guys are that good. Nylander, again, usually about a point per game player. Typically plays on that second line with John Tavares, who is also about a point per game player. I do want to preface this by saying the Leafs forward groups in terms of playing defense isn't quite there. Now, all three of these guys, when they want to play defense, are probably some of the best defensive players in the entire league. And I don't say that lightly. All three of these guys have showed incredible potential to play incredible defense when they're on the ice. The fact of the matter is, really this year, and it's kind of been an ongoing trend, and it's been trending this way, none of these guys play a whole lot of defense when it's 5-on-5. Shorthanded time and all that, you can look into that because some of these guys play on the penalty kill. Nonetheless, it's all offense focused. They're trying to outscore their issues this year, outscore their defensive and goaltending deficiencies this year. And it's worked. It's worked in the past. It's, you got 4 elite players. The only one on the board, John Tavares. 4 elite players at scoring and playmaking. You're going to score a lot of goals when that's split over the course of 2 lines. We've seen a lot of regular season and Stanley Cup success come because there are 2 lines that can score at or about a point per game clip. So that definitely helps elite offensive numbers. Okay, so that's the Leafs. Comparable contracts. And these are contracts, not necessarily players. There's only so many contracts with over $10+ million. So I got a few up. Jack Eichels, and some of these are older, some of these are newer. Jack Eichels is a little older. He's been about a point per game player throughout his career. I'm not taking into account his first year in Vegas where he was well below a point per game. He was more or less about a half point per game. Coming off neck surgery in a new location, null and void that year in terms of his stats. He's good for about 30 to 40 goals in a year, and he gets paid $10 million every single year on average. That's at least his cap hit annually. David Pastrnak, in the very first year of his $11.25 million contract for 8 years, which is what Nylander is rumored to have. Pastrnak, 38 games this year, 24 goals, 31 assists, 55 points. He's usually good for about 40 to, I think his career high is 61. I put 65. I don't know. These are kind of just estimates-ish. Nonetheless, elite goal scorer. going to put up more goals than Nylander. Nylander is probably going to get more assists than Pastrnak, though Pastrnak is they're pretty close stats this year. Pastrnak more goals, 3 more goals, 2 less assists. Pastrnak with 1 more point than Nylander on the year. Artemi Panarin of the New York Rangers, 38 games played, 25 assists, 25 goals, my apologies, which is great for Panarin because he is an elite passer. 30 assists, 55 points. You can usually expect about a 90 to 100 points per 82 games played with Panarin. Now, Panarin has injuries and so on that occasionally come up with him, but he's pretty consistent in terms of putting up offense. At least in New York, he was about in point per game to like a 90-point player in Columbus, playing with better, I'd say, line mates, better offensively talented line mates in New York. He makes 11.643 is like, I rounded up, million a year. Again, this is an older contract. This and Jack Eichel's are within their final years of the contract. Sebastian Aho, his contract takes effect next year of the Carolina Hurricanes. 37 games played, 15 goals, 31 assists, 46 points. He's usually good for about 30 to 40 goals a year, very much like Nylander, and is about a point per game player, very much like Nylander has been his entire career, excluding this year. Obviously, he's above that this year. In terms of offense, I'd say Aho is pretty comparable to Nylander. Obviously, very different roles and very different expectations of the players on their respective teams. Aho has to play a very complete 200-foot game. He has to get a little grittier than, say, Nylander does. Nylander doesn't have to play as much defense. He should. He doesn't have to. There's not that expectation of a defensive-first system in Toronto like there is in Carolina. Nylander, again, second-line player. Aho, first-line center, right? Some differences there. Nylander, not known for throwing the body, not known for getting physical and taking hits. And that's okay. That's no, knock against him. That's not to say that really factors into what he should get paid. There's just a difference between these two players. Aho will get physical. He will get gritty. He will be in scrums. He's not going to drop the gloves. He's not going to be throwing big hits. But he's willing to get into those dirty areas. So again, that's $9.75 million a year for Aho for 8 years. There's also different leadership responsibilities between these two. Aho, I believe, is the captain. I think he was named captain. This is something I should know. Right off the top of my head, I'm like 98% sure he's named the captain. Nylander, again, you got Tavares as a captain. Matthews is potentially going to be the next captain after Tavares. You have Marner, who's an alternate captain. You have Morgan Riley, who's an alternate captain. So Nylander not in as much of a leadership role with his respective team than Aho. Last up is Matthew Tkachuk. I don't know why I almost said Brady. I probably could have put Brady on the board. But Matthew Tkachuk, 39 games this year, so we're just about at the halfway point of the season. 8 goals, 27 assists, 35 points. This is notably a very down year for Matthew Tkachuk when you consider the past 2 seasons he's had. He's had back-to-back 100-point campaigns and 40-plus goal campaigns, which is crazy. This is some crazy stats. Tkachuk is a guy that will throw hits. He will get into the gritty areas. He looks to stir up controversy throughout every single game he plays. It's a part of his game. So again, very, very different from Nylander, but nonetheless, I'm just showing differences between the comparable contracts and Nylander because it's not as night and day comparing stats to stats than it is, what he might actually get. Tkachuk just was it last year was his first year of making $9.5 million a year for the next 8 years. So we're in year 2 of that? Bit of a sophomore slump for Tkachuk. There's not too much concern with him not bouncing back, which he'll probably bounce back. So, what is Nylander worth? Now, this is a great question because you look at some of these older contracts and they're fairly comparable to what Nylander has done throughout his career. specifically like Jack Eichel. That's a great example. Now, Jack Eichel's contract is coming to an end. He's making $10 million a year. Adjusted with the cap and all this stuff, we're looking around $12 million ish if Jack Eichel signed that contract back when he did, adjusted for today's dollars. Nylander would fit into that category. However, if you look at a guy like David Pastrnak, and I'm prefacing this by saying I am a Bruins fan, but I'm just going to say I have never seen Pastrnak play at such an elite level than I have this year. This is a dude who's scored 61 goals. He's a prolific goal scorer, but when he's scoring goals, he is not playing defense. This year, it has been a complete all-around game, which I think he's been one of the best players in the league in terms of leadership. He's really stepped up as a leader. He's playing defense this year. So, and considering this is the first year of Pasternak's contract, it makes it tough to justify Nylander getting the same contract. Because if I had a choice between Nylander and Pastrnak, I'm choosing Pastrnak every single day. Not to discredit Nylander because he is an elite player in this league. Right? He's a winger. He is a natural center, although he hasn't really played much center in the NHL. Whatever. Nylander is 27 years old, so at this point, we pretty much know what we're going to get from Nylander. Is he going to sustain his career year? Usually we don't see players sustain numbers from their career year, at least on the offensive side of the puck. But there are exceptions to the rule. And then you look at Aho and Tkachuk, who recently signed contracts under $10 million, who may provide more to their team in terms of leadership, in terms of hitting, in terms of play style, than, say, Nylander. Again, you got the big four in Toronto. A lot of these teams, you don't have four players that score at or above a point per game on a regular basis, unlike Toronto. So you're really valuing offense by signing Nylander and signing him for a good amount of money. If I was looking at this contract right now, it's really tough. It's really tough to say because Nylander can play elite defense. It's not like he's the worst defensive player ever. He's just playing in a system where there's no accountability for forwards to play defense. So you are not seeing it. And as a result, typically the lack of defense is more focused on offense. You take away those minutes the player spends in their own zone defending or staying back trying to defend the rush rather than attacking the net. Usually you see these offensive numbers drop a bit. Now, Nylander, not a whole lot of defense this year, 5-on-5. I watched a lot of Leafs games. I know I'm going to get hate for saying that. That is okay because this is reality. Right? So these numbers might be a little inflated offensively because of the focus on defense as opposed to offense. Now, when you look at these players, now I'm not going to lie, I don't know. I know Panarin historically, not a great defensive player. I haven't watched enough New York Rangers games, specifically looking at Panarin, to know his defensive abilities. Pastrnak, not an elite defender, but I'd say he's about league average at this point, which is from a 60 goal scorer or a player that's putting up ridiculous points per game. That's really all you can ask for. Matthews, Marner can be the exception to the rule. We've seen them be the exception to the rule. Again, that's a Leafs issue. I blame that more or less on the coaching and the general manager, but it is what it is. We're two general managers now, so see, this is tough. I don't even know. I think you got to give him 8 years because that contract will last. And then it's a question of, do you keep the big four intact? Marner's contract is going to be due up at some point. Marner has significantly outperformed Nylander over the duration of their stay in Toronto, both of them. Career stats, Marner's the much better player. Marner is also an elite defensive forward when he wants to play defense. Again, I'm not necessarily faulting these players for not playing defense this year. Again, this is more accountability, the structure, and the system. Matthews got $13.5 million for 4 years, right? So Marner, you got to think is somewhere in that 12.5 range. we'll see. And then it's how much money are you going to continue to spend on these core four, which has not resulted in really any postseason success. They got out of the first round last year and then got decimated in the second round, right? And that was as far as this team's been with these guys on the team. Just some food for thought. Realistically, I probably wouldn't go over $10.5 million. And I know that's a little aggressive. Some people are going to say he should be paid less. Lesser reduced role, lesser responsibilities, lesser leadership, lesser reliance of this player on the defensive end really results in a pay reduction. But you look at his offensive numbers, how consistent he's been. He's a 30 to 40 goal consistent scorer. Excluding this year, he'll probably exceed that this year. I don't know by how much, but right. So I realistically, within the vicinity of between like Eichel and Pastrnak, Eichel for today's dollars, because then you got to look at Tkachuk and Aho. There's an argument being made that Tkachuk wanted to be in Florida. He took a bit of a discount. Aho wants to stay in Carolina, maybe took a bit of a discount. Nonetheless, like Nylander, if he wants to stay in Toronto, could take a little bit of a discount. We don't see that in Toronto for whatever reason. See these guys getting paid out. And honestly, like, I don't fault the players for that. Go out, get paid. You don't know when your career is going to abruptly come to an end, if it does. You don't know what the future beholds. I say these players, go out, get your money, get paid. The bad contracts for me are on the general manager. So, yeah, I guess I'd say about $10.5 million. You got to sign him for 8 years. I think if you look for a contract shorter than that, I don't know. I don't know. It's tough. Right? Are you going to bank this on a career year? Are you going, you're not going to re-sign him every year because he will get a pay raise every year. On the open market, I think he gets about what he's asking for, 11.25, maybe 12. I think some team overpays for Nylander. There could be a potential where some team overpays for him and expects him to play a center role or expects him to step up on defense, and his stats drastically drop off. It's the annoying thing about career years. You don't really know what to expect after they have a career year. They could go back to being, in Nylander's case, a point per game player, a 30 to 40 goal player, or he could sustain the success, kind of like what Matthew Tkachuk did. His first 100-point, 40-goal campaign, that was his career year. Went to Florida, first year of his new extension, repeated his success in Florida. So again, you don't know what you're going to get in the future with Nylander. You assume his entire career stats in Toronto, about, again, point per game, 30 to 40 goals, but who knows? So let me know what you think. What is Nylander worth? What do you think? Do you have any other comparables? I'm sure there are other comparables out there. Just kind of a cursory check. I just want to talk about the difference between Nylander and these guys. Nylander is a great player. There's no doubt he will get paid, and he should get paid accordingly. But what is he worth is the question. At the end of the day, I think this is one of the tougher calls as to what a player should get paid in the NHL. Usually pretty good, pretty spot on with what they should actually receive and what they do receive. But Nylander, there's a lot of factors that could really play in here, and a lot of change in his play from year in and year out. That could really sway both parties to higher and lower amounts. So I think there's a lot more variables with Nylander than the average NHL player. Again, let me know what you think. What should the term be? Will they keep, Tavares is another one. His contract will expire. They might re-sign him for a significantly reduced amount. Will his production sustain at a rate it has been, right? What do you think Marner gets? Personally, I think Marner, if his contract was up today, I think he gets 12 to 12 and a half per season for the next 8 years. Marner, probably someone who deserves that. Matthews probably deserves a $13.5 million. And what do you do if Matthews decides to leave after 4 years? Honestly, I don't think he's going to leave. You don't want it. So the whole philosophy is you don't want to sign these long-term contracts as it's pros and cons, right? So you don't want to sign these long-term contracts as an NHL player because the salary cap will continually to increase. You want to cash in as often as you can. The shorter your contract and the more consistent your play, like a guy like Matthews has been, the more you're going to get paid throughout your career. If he's making $13.5 million for the next 8 years, right, then that's it. But if he's making $13.5 million for the 4 years and then he signs another 4-year contract when that expires, now you're talking about another 8 to 10 million potentially more than he would have made if he signed an 8-year extension. So there's that aspect, but there's also the aspect of maintaining longevity in the NHL. Again, we've seen players go down with injuries that have been career-ending, and it's unfortunate and sad, and some of these players are pretty valuable to the league. They're fantastic players. They're great people. So at the same time, you want that security for your future. Right? If Matthews goes down in year 4, right? Well, he's only got 4 years of that pay rather than the additional 4 years he would have gotten if he signed an 8-year contract. So personally, I think he'll sign. I think the reports will be about right. I think Nylander will sign an 8-year contract. I think it will be about $11.25 million a year. I do think that's a little much, but within the realm of reasonability, if that's even a word. Again, some of these contracts seem very high now, but with the cap increasing the way it has and the way it's projected to continually increasing by millions of dollars every year, these contracts will age a lot better than they appear now. And that's the goal of signing the 8-year contracts. Some of these contracts that were signed 6, 7, 8 years ago were head scratchers and ridiculed at the time they were signed. It was overpayment. Why are you committing this much money to a player? And over the course of time, some of those contracts, not all, but some have leveled out and become a better deal. I just did a video on Charlie Coyle. That is a great example. I thought it was kind of a rough contract. No shame to Charlie Coyle. Again, I'll never fault a player for signing those contracts, but $5.25 million at the time it was signed, I thought was a gross overpayment of Charlie Coyle. Now that's aged incredibly well, and my thoughts on that have not aged incredibly well. Just to throw that out there. So we don't know what the future beholds, but my prediction, again, I'm just repeating myself now, $10.5 million for 8 years for Nylander. Open market, probably between $11.5 and $12 million. Realistically, I think the reports are probably accurate. He'll probably sign for $11.25 million. Identical contract to David Pastrnak. I'm going to leave it there because, I'm repeating myself. So, again, let me know what you think. You got thoughts, you got ideas. What's going to happen? Do the Leafs just go out and trade Nylander and get a haul back? Do they get a couple of $5-6 million players? Should they make the cap work to get that scoring depth and make a push for the playoffs and get maybe like a first rounder or two to bolster their system? Because Nylander has a ton of value, especially at his sub $7 million contract for the offense he's putting up and the defense he's capable of playing. It's a great contract at the moment. Personally, I don't think that'll happen. I would highly entertain the thought of it if I was in the shoes of the Toronto Maple Leafs, considering the past successes in the postseason of Toronto, because there hasn't been any. Right? Something's got to change. Do you want to dedicate that much money to 4 players? Preferably, my answer after seeing this team is no. Obviously, there are different mentalities elsewhere. We can dive into that later, but I just want to touch on Nylander, what to expect, what we should expect, what we can expect, and what kind of how the process works in terms of my personal predictions with how much money players will make. Reportings on players' potential contract signings aren't always 100% accurate, but oftentimes they're within the realm of what that player will sign for. So we may see Nylander sign for, I don't know, like 11.5 instead of 11.25, or we may see him sign for 10.9 to match Marner's contract instead of 11.25, but it'll be within the vicinity, if not on the dot of 11.25. Pasternak's reporting, though, was spot on. All the reporting that he was going to get 8 years at $11.25 million is exactly what he got and signed for. I don't know if there was anyone else. I don't really remember. But anyway, that's all I got. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. Take care, all right?